Welcome to Breaking Bread with Alie and Gabby. I'm Gabby Loren.
And I'm Alie Valerio.
And today we have Kevin Nahai on the line. He is a speaker and coach specializing in anxiety management, dating and relationships, and self-esteem. And today, with tensions high, but also going over genetic predispositions and just any sort of anxiety-related conditions in life, we're going to talk about anxiety management. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us. You have been speaking at JFED, AISH, 30 years after, USC, UCLA, and a bunch of local high schools, amongst many other speaking engagements, preaching how to manage anxiety and just live better. So we want to hear all about it today. Why are you so passionate about anxiety management? Is this something you struggle with too?
Yeah. First of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. Anxiety is one of the things that I talk about. I've got a few sort of areas of expertise, but anxiety is something that I struggled with since I was a little kid. And it wasn't until later in life that I even understood what anxiety was, or what depression was, or what, sort of any sort of emotional maladaptive condition is. And when I was in third grade, my mom put me in therapy. And at the time, I thought it was just kind of this fun thing. I'm going to talk to this woman. She gives me snacks. We play board games and kind of talk about stuff. And it was very cathartic for me. But it wasn't until later that I realized, wow, a 9-year-old being in third grade, because I had so much anxiety that I had migraines and I would throw up and things like that. And, it wasn't until I got into therapy in my adult life and until I hired a coach that I really understood like what the root of these things are. And more importantly, what to do to change it, because you can spend an entire lifetime tracking down how you became anxious in the first place, or why you have an emotionally maladaptive condition. But, the thing that I'm always focused on is, okay, regardless of the origin, let's try to figure out what we're going to do about it right now.
Interesting. And are all of the sort of ways to manage your anxiety the same across the board, no matter where the origin is coming from, like you mentioned?
No, I mean, I didn't mean to say regardless of the origin as in it's irrelevant, because it is relevant and it is important. For example, somebody whose anxiety is a trauma response to something that, God forbid, happened to them as a child, if they were, sexually abused, or they got in a terrible accident or something like that, that person's going to need much more intensive anxiety management than somebody who just struggles on a day-to-day basis with stress from work or things like that. So the treatments, are different. Some of them involve medication. Some of them involve just therapy. Some of them involve different coaching practices and things like that. But the one thing that's consistent is that if you're a person who's generally anxious, or if you're a person who is generally sad, or if you're a person who's generally stressed, any sort of emotional or psychological barrier that pops up in your life consistently, right? And that can also be like with your relationships. If you're a person who tends to get attached very easily, anything that pops up consistently, the one thing across the board is that the rent is due every day. And what I mean by that is you can't take one course on managing your anxiety, or you can't go to 3 sessions with a coach, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, great, I'm fine. The rent is due every day, meaning every single day when you wake up, whatever that persistent issue is that you struggle with, it will become easier over time to deal with it. But you have to put in the work every single day, whether that's meditating or reading or journaling or exercising. 7 days a week, you have to make your psychological wellness your priority. And the thing that I often compare it to is working out or losing weight. One workout or one meal of chicken and broccoli is not going to get you in great shape. It's something that you have to do every day over a lifetime. And, feeling good and feeling tranquil and calm operates on a use it or lose it principle. Does that make sense?
Yes. So what are the signs of anxiety? What are normal, like, physical manifestations of it?
The physical signs are heart palpitations, difficulty breathing, sweaty palms, shaky hands, inability to think clearly because your thoughts are kind of cloudy and foggy. But the line between physical and emotional becomes very blurred because sometimes you might be having a physical response that's like a minor anxiety attack. But then all of a sudden you realize, oh shit, I'm having an anxiety attack. And then you start freaking out about that, and it just exacerbates your physical symptoms, so forth and so on. Or it could happen the other way. Something really disturbing or upsetting can happen, and all of a sudden your body is fine. You're just feeling kind of anxious or feeling kind of disturbed, but all of a sudden a few minutes later you're starting to have some of those heart palpitations or difficulty breathing and things like that. So the mind and the body are so interconnected. They're absolutely inextricable. And if you're struggling with it, anybody who struggles with anxiety knows that it is an intimately emotional as well as physical experience.
Absolutely. It's interesting, Kevin, when you said when you were 9, you started to feel anxiety. That's actually when I started to feel anxiety too, when I was younger. And I would get stomach aches. I wouldn't want to go to school sometimes because I had so much anxiety about wanting to be perfect. And I don't know what it was. My teacher also freaked me out. And I've actually struggled with anxiety my whole life. And as a health and fitness coach, just like what you mentioned, I tell my clients to meditate and to journal and to exercise. What are some other ways that we can manage our anxiety right now, especially because of the times, because of coronavirus, because of the riots that are happening and so much unrest that's happening in our society, where it's hard not to feel all of the ramifications of what's happening? So how can we manage our own personal stress?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. First of all, it's always nice to know that somebody relates to your personal struggles. And I was the same. I was a perfectionist and I would try to skip school and all that stuff. And as a 9-year-old, you don't know why that is, sometimes sometimes as a 20-year-old, you don't know why that is, so thanks. And I'm glad you relate. I think that there are a few fundamentals that I have built my sort of practice on in terms of helping people with their anxiety. One of them is meditation. I cannot overstress the importance and the effectiveness of meditation. There are a lot of myths about meditation out there, which is why most people don't do it. And most people say things like, meditation's not for me, or I've tried it, it just doesn't work. And if you want, we can get into what some of those myths are. Another principle is exercise. I don't care if you are 350 pounds or if you're a fitness model, exercise has a physiological response, as you know, as a health coach, Alie, that majorly quells our anxiety. But again, it's something that you have to do every single day. And you don't use it as a Band-Aid. You don't use it like I'm having an anxiety attack, so I'm going to go for a run. You use it as a long-term preventive solution. So you exercise every single day, not to bring your anxiety down in that particular moment, but to prevent your anxiety from getting worse. Some people need to be medicated on small amounts of anti-anxiety or antidepressive medications. And I think that consulting with a psychiatrist to see if that's a good fit for you is something that I often recommend. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't really make professional recommendations there. And then the last thing that I always tell people is your morning routine. Your morning routine needs to be structured. It needs to be something you do every single day. And it needs to contain a few different elements that over the years, I have sort of discovered are proven to be successful. So one of those elements is some type of movement. One of those elements is some type of journaling or reading, something where your mind is focused on language. And another element is something that's spiritual. And that could be meditating, or it could be praying for 10 minutes, or it could be reading, the Bible or the Torah or whatever you're into. And it doesn't even have to be religious, but it has to be something that connects you to a power that's a little bit greater than yourself. And doing this first thing in the morning, every morning, before you look at the phone, before you make breakfast, before you check your emails, sort of sets you up for success. And if you think about it, the first thing we do in the morning is we turn off our phone alarm. And for most people, if I play your phone alarm at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you hear it, what comes to your mind is, ugh, I hate that sound, because it reminds you of having to wake up and snooze your alarm. And so that means that every single day you're waking up with the feeling of, ugh, I hate that sound, right? And the first thing that's going through your head is sort of a negative, anxious experience. Now I got to get up. Now I got to start doing all of this stuff. And so we want to offset that as much as possible to make the rest of your day as productive as possible.
Definitely. Are there specific meditations that you like to follow, or do you just sit in silence? Like, what would you recommend? Someone download Calm?
I mean, if somebody is really dedicated to it and really wants to get into this, I have a meditation teacher who taught me something called Vedic meditation, VEDIC. It's very similar to transcendental meditation, TM. I know a lot of people are into that. And that is a practice that you learn one-on-one. It doesn't take very long. It's over the course of like a couple days. And that has completely changed my life. So mine is a mantra-based meditation, and it's 20 minutes twice a day. But for other people who just want to sort of like get their feet wet, I think that the apps are really good, Calm and Headspace. There are tons of great meditations, guided meditations on YouTube. But the main point is, there's no such thing as a bad meditation. The bad meditation is the one that you don't do. So as long as you do it every single day, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes, I don't care if it's on Calm or Headspace or anything else, doing it every single day will yield a beneficial result. And the other main point is that meditation is not the absence of thought. So you're not supposed to quiet your mind. You're not supposed to get yourself still or tranquil, and sort of get yourself into some sort of heightened, transcendent meditative state where you're floating on a cloud like a guru, right? All you're trying to do in meditation is to allow and welcome all of the thoughts into your mind, no matter how chaotic they are, and not cling on to any single one of them. So a bad thought comes in, okay, I see you, and then you let it go. And then you hear the gardener, and okay, I hear that, and then you let it go, right? And you're welcoming all of these different experiences, and you're relinquishing the need to control your thoughts. So meditation is really a practice of relinquishing control, allowing the experience to occur in your mind and in your body, whether it's a pleasant experience or a not so pleasant experience. And again, realizing that as long as you do the meditation every single day, it will yield a long-term benefit. It even yields a short-term benefit. When we study meditators, we learn that within 7 to 14 days of doing this, their brain chemistry has already changed.
I was actually just going to add to that, because I've recently studied that, yes, the brain matter does change. You're actually disconnecting more from your default network system, which is when your brain is wandering. So a lot of times we're always thinking about different things in our life, worrying about the future, the past, but not always the present. So to bring us more into the present, more into living in the now, meditation helps with that. And by also practicing meditation on a daily basis, even if it's just for a few minutes a day, you're actually building brain tissue. So it's like a workout for your brain, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody who says that, it's not true that our thoughts create our reality, or thoughts change the matter of our worlds. When they study meditators, they learn that the corpus callosum in the brain, which is the little piece of tissue, this tiny little sort of tube that connects the right to the left hemisphere of the brain, in meditators, their corpus callosum is literally thicker. It's literally larger than in non-meditators. So, all you're doing is sitting in a quiet place for a few minutes every single day, and it makes you more peaceful, it makes you happier, it makes you more tranquil, it changes the tissue and the chemistry of your brain. It's like the one sort of superhero way to change your life. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But that's not to take away from the other elements. It's not only like you meditate a couple times and then your whole life changes. As I said, there are a bunch of things that if you struggle with anxiety, you have to do every day. And one of those things is removing the causes of anxiety in your life. And it's really that simple. Like, if you're in a terrible relationship, is it simple to extricate yourself from the person you love, and to get out of a toxic relationship and all that stuff? Like, is it that easy in practice? No, not always. But it's very easy to understand the concept that when you remove the causes of stress in your life, right, and when you crack down on the things that are making you anxious in your life, and when you make yourself a priority, now you have at minimum 50% less anxiety in your life, right? So when it's out of sight, it's out of mind. I think the thing that gets people is that they are scared to make that commitment to themselves. They're scared to change their job. They're scared to get out of a bad relationship. They're scared to set certain boundaries with certain people. And they don't really understand that before you meditate, before you get a coach, before you make an exercise routine or change your morning routine, they don't really understand that the first thing you have to do is, what's the lowest hanging fruit? Get rid of the people and get rid of the things that make you anxious and unhappy every day.
Environment is so crucial. I'm glad that you are talking about this. But there's a lot of people too who don't have the luxury of being able to change their environment. There's people who are maybe living at home with their parents and their parents are fighting all the time, or they're in a toxic relationship and they are afraid to leave. So what can those people do who can't physically leave their environments?
Well, if you're in a toxic relationship and you're afraid to leave, I mean, before worrying about your anxiety, you have to leave. Like, just as somebody who's sort of in like the mental health world, like that has to be priority number one. Forget about feeling good, forget about all the other stuff. If somebody's abusing you emotionally, physically, whatever, I don't care what your situation is, come hell or high water, you have to leave. If you're stuck at home with your parents and they're arguing and it's you don't enjoy it and it sucks, and you can't leave because you're financially dependent on them, then in that situation, yeah, if you really can't leave, then you have to turn to all of the other tools and tactics. You got to start meditating. You got to start working with somebody, perhaps see a psychiatrist for medication to help you on the day-to-day, things like that. In other words, you have to create a more peaceful environment for yourself amidst chaos. So I understand that there are always nuances and challenges to removing those factors from your life. And if you really can't remove them, then yeah, you take it upon yourself to create sort of a bubble of peace and space, amidst all of that chaos and disorder. But, for most people, thank God, it's really not that tough. For most people, they're not in an abusive relationship. They do have the option not to be friends with certain people. They do have the option to consider taking a different job and things like that. So it's only in the extreme circumstances where somebody absolutely cannot get rid of those factors.
Okay, so now moving, on to kind of another point Alie brought up. What if it's a situation like in current times where people are being triggered because of the news and coronavirus and, the current protesting happening for Black Lives Matter and the destruction that's going on, not only within the Black community, but also within our local communities. So how can we navigate that anxiety and maybe manage, what's happening currently?
Well, when people ask me this question, they don't always like the answer because it seems insensitive. But this is the only way to answer your question. Collective anxiety begets individual anxiety. So when things like this are happening in the world, you need to turn off your social media. You need to go on a CNN blackout. You need to stay inside your home and do whatever is safe, right? Like learn what the safety precautions are, right? So that your life is protected. But then you need to not care about what's going on out there in the world. And when I say not care, I don't mean you don't feel for the plight of these people, but I mean, if you're a person who is triggered easily by that stuff, right? And all of the mass destruction and things like that that are going on outside the world make you fearful or make you anxious or whatever, you need to isolate yourself from the news media and what people are saying on their personal accounts and conversations with your family about it and text threads saying, oh my God, you know, all of this crazy shit is happening. Like you have to get yourself in a safe space physically and then get yourself in a safe space emotionally, which means reading books, drawing, journaling, you know, working out, doing things that basically you pretend like that stuff is not going on out there in the world.
A great way to increase happiness is actually to serve and to do for others. So maybe at this time, one option could be, instead of necessarily just forgetting about what happens, yes, delete those social platforms, don't watch the news, but maybe go out and volunteer. I know
Yeah, of
cleanup
course.
happening in the neighborhoods. You can literally go out, buy your own supplies, and start cleaning to help the business owners. Offer your help if you have a friend in need. Feeding the homeless, if that's still an option. There are things that you can do for other people right now to get you out of your zone of like that self-loathing, the isolation, just being in that negative space in your
Yeah,
house.
so that I was gonna mention that as soon as it's safe to do that stuff. I mean that if protests are actively going on and they're freaking you out and people are burning stuff and lighting things on fire, yeah, that's not a time for you to go out and volunteer. Once, you know, things get a little bit calmer and, you know, all of the tempers sort of settle down and stuff, then yeah, at that point, you know, the biggest thing with anxiety is that we're stuck inside of our own heads and we're the center of our universe and it's me, me, me all the time. So yeah, at that point, anything you can do to contribute to somebody else's life and make someone else's life better is definitely going to make your situation better, make you feel better. But in the midst of like a potential panic attack, when your anxiety is like at an all-time high and things are actively going on, that's when you just can't pay attention. You know, that's when you have to prioritize yourself.
Interesting.
This is really interesting because, like, I mean, like I just shared with you guys too, is I've had anxiety since I was 9 too. And I'm a huge empath, so I get very triggered by these things. Like I want to change the world. I want to help people and make people happy, and seeing all this destruction really, it gets me a lot. So, and
I know,
yesterday
me too.
used so much and I woke up feeling really anxious and sad, and I did coaching calls this morning with my clients, which made me feel better. So giving to others definitely helped me. So I think that could be another way, is reaching out to the people that you love, empathizing with them, talking maybe to friends that you know who are part of the Black Lives Matter group. There's so many ways to give to others that help you come outside of yourself. But really, Kevin, at the heart of this is anxiety can be so crippling. So what would you say to somebody who's feeling crippled by anxiety, who doesn't know what to do right now? Maybe somebody who's acting out of violence because they're anxious or they're fearful. What do we do when we get to those extremes?
Well, let me just respond to the first thing you said. So today is, yeah. So on Saturday, I was watching the protests in the Beverly, Fairfax area.
And that was what day? Because this will come out later. So it was like the end of May, right?
It was like May 30th.
Okay, great. May
Yeah.
30th.
Yeah. There were huge protests in the Beverly, Fairfax area. And everything was on fire and all of the stores were looted and glass and destruction everywhere. And, you know, I know so many people who live in that area and I know a lot of business owners there. And I know business owners and people throughout the entire city, and watching them having, you know, millions of dollars worth of damage, their livelihoods destroyed, things like that. I, like you, Alie, feel that a lot. And it was extremely anxiety inducing for me, extremely stressful for me, extremely upsetting for me. And right then, when you're in that moment, you know, personally, when I was feeling that way, I couldn't get on a coaching call right away and help another client because I was too much in my own body, too much in my own mind. And it was kind of like I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, but at a certain point I had to force myself to, because what I realized is if I am an emotional basket case, then I can't help anybody else. I can't take care of anybody else unless I know that I am in a more peaceful and, sort of tranquil state. So for people who get into that space where their anxiety is crippling and where they feel paralyzed because anxiety is a fight, flight, or freeze response, you have to stop and realize that you're probably continuing to engage in the thing that makes you feel paralyzed, whether that's watching the news or continuing on a toxic relationship or continuing on an argument with a family member or whatever. The very thing that made you anxious in the first place, in some form of another, you are probably continuing the behavior because you haven't taken the first step to cut it off and prioritize yourself. And one thing that I always say is that whether it's anxiety or any other emotional problem, human beings have this weird thing, I don't know how we got to this place, where we constantly go to the source of a problem seeking a solution. So let me explain what I mean by that. If you are in a fight with your boyfriend and your boyfriend is treating you really poorly, a lot of the time what we'll do is we'll chase and chase and chase the boyfriend, and we'll do everything we can to try to make the boyfriend to like us or, fix the relationship or make everything tranquil or whatever. But we're going to the source of the problem seeking a solution. And another thing that I say is that you can't heal in the same environment in which you got sick. So if a certain environment is making you sick or inducing your anxiety, human beings have a thing where we want to put ourselves in that very environment and try to heal there. We want to find a solution from the very source of the problem, right? So that's why I say when most people are paralyzed by anxiety or really struggling with some kind of emotional issue, it might take you a second to realize that you're still doing things that are creating that environment. You haven't removed yourself from that environment that made you sick in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But I think it's also hard to want to be somebody who wants to empathize with others and to support people, and then to remove yourself and be like, well, it's a boundary, right? We have to set boundaries for ourselves. And I think for me, that's one of the hardest things for me, is to set boundaries with people and situations. But
it is. And look, I've dedicated my life to helping other people, to empathizing with their plight. My entire life's work is making other people's lives better. So you're preaching to the choir. I know your pain that you want to do that for other people. But the thing I had to learn, Alie, is don't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Like, you can make it a commitment every day to make other people's lives better, but not at your own expense. If it's destroying you, then in the long run, you won't be able to help other people, know? So and it's a really difficult balancing act, So I totally get what you're saying.
It actually reminds me of when you're on an airplane and they go through the safety instructions and they say, if there's an emergency and the
Put your
mask
face mask
drops
on
down.
first.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have to put your face mask on first before you can even help your child sitting next to you. Because if you're not okay and you don't have oxygen, you cannot help anybody else around you. So I feel like that's a perfect way to look at the situation, is that you need to start with yourself and make sure you're healthy and good, and then you can help other people and maybe loosen the boundary.
One thing that always really alarmed me when I got into this sort of self-help industry is the number of therapists and coaches and counselors and things like that who are so emotionally messed up, and people who make a living trying to give other people advice and helping other people, but they haven't worked through their own stuff. So for example, I'm not a very good business person. I don't have a lot of experience in business. So I never coach anybody in business. Somebody comes to me and says, I want to 10X my business. I say, I'm not the person for you because I don't know how to do that. I only work on issues that I have gone through myself and overcome myself, right? It's kind of like if you had a personal trainer who was obese, right? That maybe he was obese at one point in his life and now he's in great shape. Okay, awesome. But if you have a personal trainer who is currently obese, they're showing you that they have a problem with their physical fitness and with their eating. So I always wonder, like, why are there so many coaches out there who haven't done this work on themselves, yet they're trying to build a profession helping other people? So it's exactly what you're saying with like the face mask thing, you know, help other people, contribute to other people's lives. It's going to make yourself feel better. And it is, you know, one of the crucial steps in helping you get through your own problems. But you also have to understand at the same time, it starts with you. Don't set yourself on fire. Don't destroy yourself for other people's benefit.
Amazing.
Can we talk a little bit too about how, I think you alluded to this in the beginning, is that we manifest, we've talked about this in our second episode, whatever we focus on grows, right? I think you're a Tony person too, right?
Sorry, say it again.
Tony Robbins.
Oh yeah, I like Tony Robbins a lot. Right. Yeah.
He's like, whatever we focus on grows, and where focus goes, energy flows. So this reminds me about stress and anxiety, and manifesting is like, if we continue to focus on the problem, it's just going to expand the problem without really creating a solution. So how do we switch our focus when we tend to go to the negativity? How do we change it into a more positive light so that we can manifest more abundance in our life and have more peace?
That's a great question, and I'm really glad you brought that up. How do you switch your focus? You switch your focus. And what that means in a practical sense is that anytime you have an anxiety-inducing thought or a negative thought or a self-deprecating thought, which we have all day long, 1,000 times a day, you have to catch that thought and you have to interrupt that process and you have to replace it. Now, what do you replace it with? You can replace it with an affirmation. You can replace it with one of the items on a self-love list that you wrote. You can replace it with, I forgive myself for so forth and so on. You can replace it with a goal that you have. You can replace it with something that is positive and self-affirming, preferably that you've written down on a piece of paper or several pieces of paper, and you replace it with a new story. So if you have this story in your head that I'm fat and no one ever wants to date me, that story is running through your head all day long, right? And it pops up in many different situations. And your mind does not know the difference between that story and the story that is, I look good and I'm attractive and I'm desirable. Both of those, either of those can be true. One is not more real than the other. The only reason that the story that I'm fat and people don't like me is true is that it's what you focused on. It's what you've burned into your brain. So when I say catch and replace, catch the negative thought, interrupt that thought process and replace it with a positive thought or an aspirational thought or one that you want to be true, you are switching your focus and you understand that your mind doesn't know the difference, right? So whatever you put into your mind is what becomes true. Now, the crazy thing is that most people think when I feel better, I'll think differently and then I'll take better actions and things in my life will change. But it doesn't work that way. It's the opposite process. When you change your thoughts and when you force yourself to change your behavior, then you feel better. So you really have to sort of trick your mind in the beginning, and it might feel disingenuous, like you're telling yourself things that you don't think are true, but they are true. You have just given yourself a false narrative for your whole life. Now, let me just throw out the caveat that you got to be honest with yourself. Like if you got a drinking problem, yeah, it's true you have a drinking problem. Like you can't be lying to yourself about that. If you have a really bad temper and other people notice it, there are certain things you got to be honest with yourself and fix, right? But I'm talking about more when you're just giving yourself bad stories that are not true, that are self-deprecating, and you've been telling yourself them for years. If you've just been repeating this false narrative to yourself over and over again, you have to become a seeker of the truth, and you can't always trust your mind and your emotions to give you an accurate sort of compass in terms of, what your problems are and how confident you are and how competent you are and things like that. Because, we usually act very arrogant, but we actually feel much less much less than we are. So we have to sort of get things back into balance where, you know, the way you see yourself is similar to how you actually are, and the way you project yourself to the world is the same as how you actually are.
Amazing. Is there any last things you guys want to go over for how to combat anxiety? Like, Alie, is there any methods that you engage in? Do you do meditation? Is there something we haven't talked about that helps you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a health and wellness coach. So I just did a live this morning with my coaching group about morning routines, waking up, meditating. I actually use a Tony Robbins video. It's called Priming. If you guys go onto YouTube and you look for Tony Robbins Priming, it's all about sending energy throughout your body, thinking about gratitude, and then thinking about 3 things that you want to accomplish as if they've already happened. So you're like manifesting what you want to create in your life. And just like what you said, Kevin, it's not about doing this once in a while. It's about having these daily disciplines every single day that you can have and count on consistently, so that you can work on changing your mindset and focus on everything that you do have. So after I prime, I go for a walk, and I usually listen to like Torah, or like I get connected to spirituality, or I'll listen to Audible and like listen to a book, or I'll just walk silently so I can just enjoy the day and the sun. And then I come home and I journal, and I look at my day and everything that I have to do that day. And then I just delve into my day, or I'll work out. And I always schedule my workouts and even like my meals, my calls. I think just keeping a schedule is really, really important, because it's the one thing that you can truly control. And a lot of anxiety is feeling out of control. So that's very, very helpful. But of course, as a health and fitness coach, exercise, I think, is one of the most crucial things that you can do to change your mindset. It increases endorphins. It changes your neurochemistry. It makes you happy. It gives you energy. So, and Tony Robbins says this all the time too, is like, change your state. How fast can you change your state? Like that. Like, just get up, move, go for a walk, call a friend, exercise. Like, that is the best way to change your state and to get out of your head, because the second that you're in your head, you're dead. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I would say. And also, like, get a coach, you guys. Like,
I was about to say that.
Right? Like, if you're battling anxiety your whole life and you are stressed beyond belief and you can't even think outside of yourself, you need an outside person to help lead you towards where you want to go. Like, I've been to therapy too since I was 9 years old. My mom's actually a psychologist, but I think the biggest thing that I've done for myself is getting a coach and having someone give me daily tools that I can use, and I have someone to follow up with. So when I do get into a negative space, I can count on communicating with my coach to help kind of lead me back to, like, it's like veering off the path a little bit. You like get a flat tire, you fix the tire, you get back on the path, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So get a coach.
Yeah. I was gonna add 2 things. One is I was gonna say, get a coach, or get someone. You know, if you have like let's say a 30-day fitness challenge, how are you going to be more successful? If you and your best friend commit to doing it and you're holding yourself accountable, or if you do it by yourself, right? And we all have this thing that, like, we're dying to do everything by ourselves. Like, we think that getting a coach or hiring a therapist or whatever means that, like, there's something wrong with you and you're not good enough and, you know, whatever. Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you feel really unhappy and anxious all the time, there is something wrong with you, and you can't do it by yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you've been trying to do it by yourself all of these years. And how has it worked out for you? It hasn't worked out for you very good. And as I said, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means that if you're trying to learn calculus, you need to learn it from a professor of calculus. It means that if you're drowning in the ocean and somebody sends you a life jacket, you're not going to throw it behind you and say, oh no, I can do it myself. No, you're going to take the assistance. So hire Alie, hire me, go find somebody on the internet, you know, find someone who cares about your success, and discard this idea that you have to do everything on your own. And then one more thing that I'll just add, I touched on this very briefly earlier, but, you know, I talked about how important meditation is. I talked about how important, exercising is, and being accountable to someone else and all of that. But one of the things that has made a huge difference in my life is the spiritual component. And since I know that you guys sometimes talk about these themes on this podcast, I'll just mention that, I had a bar mitzvah, but that was like the extent of my Judaism. I never met with my rabbi. I never read Torah. I never prayed. I never did any of that stuff until I realized, fairly recently, I would say last year, maybe a year or two, that I am literally leaving money on the table in terms of my happiness and my tranquility. And I'm not saying that, you have to become a religious person, or that you have to, believe in God if you don't, or you're an atheist. Everybody, their sort of spiritual connection is up to them. But when I started reading Torah, and when I started doing 10 minutes of daily prayer, when I started listening to rabbis, and when I started paying attention to the sermons on the high holidays and things like that, you can bash it all you want, but it makes you realize that you're not alone in this universe. And it makes you realize, as I said earlier, that you don't have to do everything on your own. And it gives you a sense of security, and most importantly, a sense of belonging. When you belong to something that is higher than yourself, right? Whether that's the cosmos or God or your religion or the universe or whatever, when you have some sort of connection to something greater than you, for me, it's Judaism and my connection with my God, it elevates everything in your life, and it gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. And as I said, so much of our problem in life is that it's me all the time, right? But now when I'm connected to something greater than me, my focus becomes fulfilling that connection. My focus becomes seeing myself from a more transcendent position. My focus becomes improving the lives of other people, right? And so you become less selfish, and as a result, you become happier and more peaceful. So shameless plug for anybody who, is sort of interested in like the spiritual stuff and, might want to dabble a little bit with their Torah. Just wake up one day and just read it, just start praying, even if you don't know how. Like, that's what I did. And I learned as I went, and it has helped me so much.
Yeah, I love that you brought that point up, because since I even became more connected to Torah over the last year, I'm coming up on a year next month, I've noticed such a shift in my life with all of the chaos and the things going on in the world, especially right now. I've been able to like find the calmness in it and recenter myself with a lot of these tools that we've talked about. So I think that for anyone listening, finding faith in these times, praying, doing a group or your own individual meditation, these can all be ways in which to alleviate this anxiety we all tend to have at some level or another. I had an extreme case of anxiety the last few months due to a disease, thyroiditis. And so for me, I was using meditation. I was taking CBD oil to actually help with that as well. There's just so many different things that you can do for yourself. There's even like a 3-3-3 rule where they say that if you look around and you name 3 things that you see, and you name 3 sounds you hear, and then move 3 parts of your body, it tricks your mind mentally. And it brings you back to the present moment. Because again, we're not thinking in present when we have anxiety. We're thinking about a lot of other things. So Kevin, thank you so much for, coming on this Zoom today to help us be better and do better and live better. Where can we connect with you after this podcast, and where can people like follow up with you, get tips, motivational and inspirational videos?
Thank you. My Instagram is the best way to reach out to me. You can just send me a DM. I'm on Facebook as well. It's just my name, Kevin Nahai. I'll give you ladies my email address if you want to like put it in the description wherever this is posted. If somebody wants to email me, in case they feel that's a little more secure. My line is always open. I respond to every single message, and I take phone calls with people all the time for free. Somebody who has a little problem, they need a little guidance. If they can't like afford a full coaching program, I get on the phone with them for an hour for free all the time. So I'm always happy to do that. As I say, just all you got to do is reach out. And as I was saying earlier, when you reach out, when you take the first step, right? Reach out to somebody else. You're making a commitment to yourself, and you're proving to yourself that you are worth it. You're worth feeling better. You're worth changing your life. All you have to do is take the first step. So don't go it alone. As Gabby said, have faith, put your faith into something better. As Alie said, implement these practices, have the discipline every day, and don't do it alone.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. You can follow Alie at Alie V Health or me at Gabby Loren TV. We will see you next time on another episode of Breaking Bread with Alie and Gabby.
Love your two favorite Jewish girls and Kevin. Bye, guys.